The rain came down in sheets so thick that Magdalena Porter could barely see 3 feet ahead of her mare, and when the animal stumbled for the third time on the muddy road outside Nebraska City, Nebraska, she knew she had made a terrible mistake leaving town so late in the afternoon. It was September of 1876, and the autumn storms that swept across the prairie could be as dangerous as any blizzard when they caught a traveler unprepared. Her dress clung to her skin, heavy with water, and her teeth chattered so hard she feared they might crack. The road to her family's homestead was still 5 miles distant, and darkness would fall within the hour. She had been in town visiting the mercantile, picking up supplies her mother needed for preserving vegetables from their garden. Her father had warned her to return before midday, but she had lingered, speaking with Mrs. Henderson about a teaching position that might open at the schoolhouse come spring. Magdalena was 20 years old, unmarried and determined to make something of herself beyond being simply another farmer's daughter on the Nebraska plains. Her mother despaired of her ever finding a husband, but Magdalena had standards. She wanted a man who saw her as more than a vessel for bearing children and cooking meals. Now, as lightning split the darkening sky and thunder rolled across the flatlands, those ambitions seemed foolish. She should have listened to her father. She should have left hours ago. The mare whinnied in distress, her hooves sliding in the mud, and Magdalena leaned forward to pat the animal's neck with a trembling hand. "Just a little further, Daisy," she whispered, though she knew they had far more than a little way to go. That was when she saw him. At first, he was just a dark shape emerging from the curtain of rain, leading a massive bay horse along the road. As he drew closer, Magdalena's breath caught in her throat. He was the largest man she had ever seen, standing well over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the stormy sky behind him. His hair hung past his shoulders in wet, dark waves, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin clothing that clung to a frame of solid muscle, and even soaked through, he moved with the easy confidence of a man completely at home in the wilderness, a mountain man. Magdalena had heard of such men, trappers and hunters who lived in the wild places, coming to civilization only when they needed supplies. They were rough, dangerous men, or so her mother always said, men to be avoided by respectable young women. But as the stranger approached, Magdalena saw his eyes, and they were not the eyes of a dangerous man. They were a deep brown, warm despite the cold rain and filled with concern as he took in her bedraggled state. "Miss," he called out, his voice deep and carrying easily over the sound of the storm, "you should not be out here alone." "I know," Magdalena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am trying to reach my father's homestead. It is 5 miles north." The mountain man frowned, looking up at the darkening sky. "You will not make it before nightfall, not in this storm." "I have no choice," Magdalena said. "My family will be worried." "They will be more worried if you die of exposure on this road," the man said bluntly. He stepped closer, and Magdalena could see the concern etched on his rugged features. "My name is Vincent Vale. I have a cabin 2 miles west of here. You can shelter there until the storm passes, and I will see you home safely." Magdalena hesitated. Everything she had been taught told her to refuse, to keep riding no matter how difficult the journey. A young woman did not go to a strange man's cabin, especially not a man like this, who looked like he could snap a person in half with his bare hands. But another crack of lightning, closer this time, made her mare rear in panic. Magdalena clung to the saddle, barely keeping her seat, and when the horse's hooves hit the ground again, they slid dangerously in the mud. Vincent Vale moved with startling speed for such a large man. In an instant, he was at the mare's head, catching the bridle and speaking in low, soothing tones. The horse calmed immediately, responding to the quiet authority in his voice. "Easy now," he murmured. "Easy, girl. You are safe." Magdalena watched in amazement as the frightened animal settled under his touch. When Vincent looked up at her again, his expression was kind but firm. "Miss, I mean you no harm, but I cannot in good conscience let you continue in this weather. If you will not come to my cabin, then at least let me escort you home. But I am telling you truly, you will not make 5 miles before this storm gets worse." As if to emphasize his words, the rain intensified, coming down so hard that Magdalena could no longer see the trees she knew lined the road. The temperature had dropped noticeably, and her fingers were numb where they gripped the reins. "I thank you for your offer, Mr. Vale," she began, intending to refuse despite the weather, but Vincent shook his head. "No arguing, miss. I will not have your death on my conscience." He turned and began leading his own horse closer. "You will ride, I will walk alongside." "What?" "No, I could not possibly. Your mare is exhausted and frightened," Vincent interrupted, his voice gentle but brooking no argument. "My horse, Thunder, is trained for mountain trails and storms far worse than this. He will not stumble or panic. You will be safer on him." "But you will be walking," Magdalena protested. "In this rain, that is, I have walked through worse," Vincent said simply. "I have lived in the mountains for the past 8 years, miss. A little rain does not trouble me." Before Magdalena could protest further, Vincent had moved to her side. He reached up, and for a moment she thought he would simply pluck her from the saddle. Instead, he waited, his hands ready to help but not presuming. "May I?" he asked quietly. Magdalena found herself nodding. Strong hands gripped her waist, and she was lifted from Daisy's back as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. For just a moment, she was held against that massive chest, and she could feel the solid warmth of him even through their soaked clothing. Then she was being set gently on her feet in the mud. Vincent moved to his own horse, checking the saddle and adjusting the stirrups. Thunder was indeed a magnificent animal, larger than any horse Magdalena had seen in Nebraska City, with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition that spoke of extensive training. "Up you go," Vincent said, and once again those strong hands were on her waist, lifting her effortlessly into the saddle. The stirrups were far too long for her shorter legs, but Vincent quickly adjusted them, his movements efficient and practiced. "I will lead both horses," he explained, gathering the reins of both animals. "Hold tight to the saddle horn and do not worry. Thunder will not let you fall." "Mr. Vale," Magdalena tried one more time. "This is not right. You should ride. I can walk." Vincent looked up at her, and despite the rain streaming down his face, she could see the absolute determination in his eyes. "Miss, I am a mountain man. I have crossed the Rockies in winter, hunted grizzly bears, and survived conditions that would kill most men. A little rain on a Nebraska plain is nothing to me. But you," his voice softened, "you are cold and frightened, and your horse is ready to collapse. So please, just this once, let someone help you without arguing about propriety." Magdalena found she had no response to that. She gripped the saddle horn as Vincent had instructed and felt Thunder shift beneath her, responding to some silent command from his master. Then they were moving, Vincent walking beside the great horse, leading Daisy with his other hand, and Magdalena sat high in the saddle watching this extraordinary man walk through the rain as if it were a sunny spring day. They made slow progress through the storm. Vincent kept up a steady pace, never wavering despite the mud that must have been trying to pull his boots from his feet with every step. He spoke occasionally to the horses, his deep voice somehow audible even over the thunder, and both animals followed him with complete trust. Magdalena could not stop watching him. Water ran in rivulets down his face, dripped from his hair and beard, soaked his buckskin clothing until it clung to every muscle of his powerful frame. He must have been freezing, yet he gave no sign of discomfort. He simply walked, steady and strong, keeping her safe. "Mr. Vale," she called down after perhaps 20 minutes. "Are you certain you are well?" He glanced up at her, and to her amazement he smiled. It transformed his rugged face, making him look younger and infinitely more approachable. "I am well, miss. Are you warm enough up there?" Warm enough was a relative term. She was still soaked and shivering, but being out of the wind and on the steady back of thunder was infinitely better than trying to control her panicked mare. "I am better than I was," she admitted. "Thank you. Truly, thank you." "No thanks needed," Vincent said. "Any decent man would do the same." But Magdalena knew that was not true. Many men would have offered help, but how many would have given up their own comforts so completely? How many would have insisted she take the better horse while they walked beside her in the rain? "Will your cabin be warm?" she asked, suddenly worried about what would happen when they arrived. Her reputation would be in tatters if anyone discovered she had spent time alone with a man, unchaperoned, in his cabin. But the alternative was dying of exposure on the road, and she found she trusted this strange mountain man not to take advantage of her situation. "I have a good stove and plenty of firewood," Vincent assured her. "You will be able to warm yourself and dry your clothes." Magdalena felt her cheeks heat despite the cold. "I could not possibly undress in your cabin, Mr. Vale. There is a curtain that divides the sleeping area from the main room," Vincent explained, his tone matter of fact. "You can change behind that while I tend to the horses and the fire. I will not see anything improper, miss. You have my word." The simple sincerity in his voice made Magdalena believe him completely. Vincent Vale might be a rough mountain man who lived far from civilization, but he was also a gentleman in ways that many so-called civilized men were not. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it grew worse as they traveled west, leaving the main road for what seemed to be little more than a deer trail through increasingly rough terrain. But Vincent never faltered, and Thunder moved with sure-footed confidence even when the path became treacherous. "How long have you lived out here?" Magdalena asked, partly to distract herself from the cold and partly because she was genuinely curious about this man who seemed so at home in the wilderness. "I came to Nebraska from Montana 8 years ago," Vincent replied. "Before that, I spent 5 years in the mountains, trapping and hunting." "You were very young then to go into the mountains alone," Magdalena observed. Vincent was quiet for a moment before answering. "I was 15 when I left civilization behind." "There were reasons, miss, reasons that made the wilderness seem safer than towns and people." There was pain in his voice, old but still present, and Magdalena found herself wanting to know more. But before she could ask, Vincent pointed ahead. "There. You can see the light from my cabin windows." Through the rain, Magdalena could indeed make out a warm glow in the distance. As they drew closer, she could see a sturdy log cabin with a covered porch and smoke rising from the chimney. It looked solid and well-maintained, nothing like the rough shack she had imagined a mountain man might live in. "You left the fire burning when you went out?" she asked. "I always keep the fire going," Vincent explained. "In the mountains, you learn that coming home to a warm cabin can mean the difference between life and death on a cold night." He led the horses to a barn beside the cabin, also well-built and weatherproof. "Come, miss, let us get you inside." Once again, those strong hands lifted her from the saddle, and this time Vincent did not immediately set her down. "Can you walk? Your legs will be stiff from the cold." Magdalena tried to put weight on her feet and nearly collapsed. Her legs had gone numb without her realizing it, and pins and needles shot through them as circulation returned. Without hesitation, Vincent swept her up into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed no more than a child. "I have you," he murmured. "Just hold on." Magdalena had no choice but to wrap her arms around his neck as he carried her through the rain toward the cabin. She could feel the solid strength of him, the way his muscles flexed as he moved, and despite everything she had been taught about proper behavior, she felt completely safe in his arms. Vincent kicked open the cabin door and carried her inside, setting her gently on a chair near the stove. The warmth hit Magdalena like a physical thing, and she began shaking even harder as her frozen body tried to adjust to the temperature change. "I must tend to the horses," Vincent said, already moving toward the door. "There are blankets on the bed behind that curtain and dry clothes in the chest. They will be far too large for you, but they are clean and warm. Please, change out of those wet things before you catch your death." Then he was gone, back out into the storm, and Magdalena was alone in the cabin. She looked around, amazed by what she saw. The cabin was immaculately clean and surprisingly comfortable. The main room had a cooking area with a well-made stove, a table with 2 chairs, and several shelves lined with books. Books! She had expected many things from a mountain man's cabin, but not a personal library. The sleeping area was separated by a heavy canvas curtain. Magdalena forced herself to stand, her legs still wobbly, and made her way behind it. There was a proper bed with a thick mattress and several quilts, a small chest of drawers, and pegs on the wall holding extra clothing. Magdalena knew she should feel uncomfortable changing in a strange man's cabin, but the need to get out of her freezing, wet clothes overrode her modesty. She peeled off her soaked dress, petticoats, and undergarments, hanging them on the pegs to dry. From the chest, she found a clean cotton shirt and wool pants, both enormous on her small frame but blessedly warm and dry. She had to roll up the sleeves and pant legs multiple times, and she used a length of rope she found to cinch the pants around her waist. When she emerged from behind the curtain wrapped in a thick blanket, Vincent had returned. He had removed his own soaked buckskin shirt and stood before the stove in just his undershirt and pants, both of which clung wetly to his frame. Magdalena found herself staring at the play of muscles across his broad back as he worked to build up the fire. "I am sorry," he said without turning around. "I know this is improper, but I need to get warm as well, and these clothes will dry faster if I am near the heat." "You have nothing to apologize for," Magdalena said firmly. "You gave me your horse and walked through the storm to keep me safe. You may do whatever you need to be comfortable in your own home." Vincent turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You are a remarkable woman, miss. Most ladies would be having vapors about now." "Most ladies did not grow up on a homestead," Magdalena replied. "I am not as delicate as I might look." "I can see that," Vincent said quietly. "Please sit. I will make us something hot to drink." Magdalena settled back into the chair, pulling the blanket tighter around herself as she watched Vincent move around the cabin. He prepared coffee with practiced efficiency, then added something from a bottle to each cup. "Whiskey," he explained, handing her one of the steaming mugs. "It will help warm you from the inside." Magdalena had never tasted whiskey before, but she took the mug gratefully and sipped. The liquid burned going down, but warmth spread through her chest and belly, pushing back the deep chill that had settled into her bones. "Thank you," she said, meeting Vincent's eyes over the rim of her cup. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not found me." "Nothing good," Vincent said honestly. He settled into the other chair, his own cup cradled in hands that seemed almost too large for the delicate ceramic. That storm is only getting worse. Even if your mare had not collapsed, you would have been in serious danger. My father will be beside himself with worry, Magdalena said, feeling a pang of guilt. He told me not to stay in town too long. We will get you home as soon as the storm passes, Vincent assured her. It should blow itself out by morning, and then I will escort you to your family's homestead. You have already done so much, Magdalena protested. And I will do more, Vincent said firmly. I will not send you off alone, miss. Not after this. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their coffee and letting the warmth of the fire seep into their bones. Magdalena found herself studying Vincent when she thought he was not looking. Now that they were inside and she could see him properly, she was struck by how handsome he was beneath the rough exterior. His features were strong and even, his eyes intelligent and kind, and there was something about the way he moved that spoke of carefully controlled power. You have many books, she observed, looking at the shelves. I did not expect that. Vincent's expression grew guarded. You thought a mountain man would be illiterate. No, Magdalena said quickly. Well, perhaps I apologize. That was presumptuous of me. To her relief, Vincent's expression softened. I do not take offense, miss. Most people make the same assumption. The truth is, I was well educated before I went into the mountains. My father was a schoolmaster in Boston, and he made sure I could read and write and cipher numbers. The books are companions that never judge and never betray. Again, that hint of old pain in his voice. Magdalena wanted to ask what had driven a young man from civilization into the wilderness, but she sensed it was not the time. Instead, she asked, "What do you raid?" Vincent's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Everything I can get my hands on. When I go into town for supplies, I always buy books. I have Shakespeare and Dickens, histories and philosophies, even some poetry. Poetry. Magdalena could not hide her surprise or delight. I love poetry. Do you have Wordsworth? I do, Vincent said, rising and going to the shelves. He returned with a slim volume and handed it to her. This is one of my favorites. Magdalena opened the book reverently, running her fingers over the pages. Her own family's homestead had few books, and those they had were mostly practical volumes about farming and animal husbandry. To see such a collection in a cabin in the wilderness felt like discovering treasure. I wanted to be a teacher, she said softly. I still want to be one. There is a position that might open at the school in Nebraska City, and I have been learning as much as I can, so I will be ready. You would make an excellent teacher, Vincent said with such certainty that Magdalena looked up in surprise. You have curiosity and intelligence. Those are the most important qualities. You can tell that from one conversation, Magdalena asked, half teasing. I can tell that from the way you held yourself together during the storm, Vincent replied seriously. You were frightened, but you did not panic. You argued about propriety even when you were freezing and exhausted. And now you are here, in a strange man's cabin, but instead of vapors or hysterics, you are asking about books and talking about your dreams. Yes, miss, I can tell you would be an excellent teacher. Warmth flooded through Magdalena that had nothing to do with the fire or the whiskey. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, seeing her not just as a daughter or a potential wife, but as a person with her own value and capabilities. What is your given name, miss? Vincent asked suddenly. I cannot keep calling you miss. Magdalena, she replied. Magdalena Porter, Magdalena, Vincent repeated, and the way he said it with such care and warmth made her name sound beautiful. It suits you. It is a strong name. And what of you? Magdalena asked. You told me your name is Vincent Vale, but I know nothing else about you. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tinged with old sorrow. I told you my father was a schoolmaster in Boston. What I did not tell you is that he was also a drunk and a cruel man. My mother died when I was 12, and after that, there was nothing to temper his rages. He would beat me for the smallest infractions, real or imagined. When I was 15, I fought back one night. I hit him, knocked him down, and then I ran. I ran as far and as fast as I could, and I ended up in the mountains where no one could find me. Magdalena felt her throat tighten with sympathy. Vincent, I am so sorry, he shrugged, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. It was a long time ago. The mountains taught me to be strong, to rely on myself. I learned to trap and hunt, to survive in conditions that would kill most men. And I learned that I was better off alone, where I could not be hurt and could not hurt anyone else. You are not like your father, Magdalena said firmly. I can see that clearly. Vincent looked at her, and his eyes were full of something she could not quite name. How can you be so sure? You have known me for only a few hours. Because of everything you have done tonight, Magdalena replied. A cruel man would have left me to struggle on alone. A selfish man would have ridden while I walked. But you gave me your horse. You walked beside me in the rain. You brought me to safety and gave me warm clothes and hot coffee. Those are not the actions of a cruel man. Vincent's expression shifted, becoming vulnerable in a way that made Magdalena's heart ache. You have a generous heart, Magdalena Porter. I have an honest one, she corrected gently. And honestly, I think you are one of the best men I have ever met. The silence that fell between them then was charged with something new, something neither of them seemed quite ready to name. Vincent cleared his throat and stood abruptly. I should check on the horses again, he said, and see if I can determine when the storm might pass. He pulled on his still damp buckskin shirt and went outside, leaving Magdalena alone with her thoughts and the rapid beating of her heart. She should not be feeling this way about a man she had just met. It was impractical and improper and completely unlike her usual sensible self. But there was something about Vincent Vale that called to her, something that went beyond his obvious physical strength and into something deeper and more profound. He was lonely. She could see it in the careful way he maintained his cabin, in the books he surrounded himself with, in the pain that flickered in his eyes when he spoke of his past. He had been alone for so long, hiding in the wilderness because he feared becoming the monster his father had been. But he was not a monster. He was a protector, a gentleman, a man of unexpected depth and kindness. And Magdalena found herself wishing she did not have to leave in the morning, wishing she could stay and learn more about this remarkable man who had walked through a storm to keep her safe. Vincent returned after a few minutes, water dripping from his hair. The storm is still raging. We will need to wait until morning. My parents will be so worried, Magdalena said, guilt washing over her again. I know, Vincent said gently. But if we tried to travel now in the dark and the storm, we would both be in danger. Your parents would rather you were safe, even if they worry. He was right, of course. Magdalena knew her father well enough to know he would prefer her sheltered and safe over risking the journey home in dangerous conditions. But she also knew there would be consequences for spending the night in a man's cabin, even with the best of intentions. I may be ruined after this, she said quietly. If anyone finds out I was here alone with you. Vincent's expression hardened. Then we will make certain no one finds out. I will bring you home at first light and let you down well before we reach your homestead. You can tell your parents you sheltered under a tree or in a barn. They need never know about me or this cabin. I would not lie to them, Magdalena said firmly. Then tell them the truth, Vincent replied. Tell them a man helped you and behaved as a perfect gentleman. If they doubt your word, then that is their failing, not yours. Magdalena was struck by the simple wisdom of this. Why should she lie or be ashamed when she had done nothing wrong? Vincent had saved her life and treated her with nothing but respect. If people chose to think ill of that, the fault was in their minds, not in her actions. "You are right," she said. "I will tell them the truth, and if there are consequences, I will face them." Vincent nodded approvingly. "That is the spirit. Now you should rest. You have had a harrowing evening, and tomorrow will be a long day." "Where will you sleep?" Magdalena asked, suddenly realizing there was only one bed. "I will take the floor near the fire," Vincent said. "I have slept in far worse conditions, I assure you." "I cannot take your bed," Magdalena protested. "You can and you will," Vincent said firmly. "I will hear no arguments on this, Magdalena. You are my guest and you are still recovering from the cold. The bed is yours." There was such authority in his voice that Magdalena found herself nodding even as she wanted to protest further. Vincent pulled several blankets from a chest and made himself a pallet on the floor near the stove. It looked terribly uncomfortable compared to the bed, but when he lay down, he seemed perfectly content. Magdalena retreated behind the curtain and climbed into Vincent's bed. The mattress was soft and the quilts were warm, and she was surrounded by the subtle scent of him, wood smoke and pine and something indefinably masculine. She should not have found it comforting, but she did. "Vincent," she called softly. "Yes, thank you for everything." "Sleep well, Magdalena." She wanted to say more, to somehow express the confusing rush of emotion she was feeling, but she could not find the words. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the warmth and safety of the cabin lull her toward sleep. But sleep did not come easily. She kept thinking about the man lying on the hard floor beyond the curtain, the man who had given up his comfort without hesitation to ensure her safety. She thought about his gentle voice when he spoke to the horses, his shy pride when he showed her his books, the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his father. Somewhere in the middle of the night, she heard Vincent get up and add more wood to the fire. She heard him move quietly around the cabin, checking the windows and the door, making sure everything was secure. He was still protecting her, even in the safety of his own home, and that thought made her chest feel tight with emotion. When morning finally came, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening. Magdalena woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, and when she emerged from behind the curtain, she found Vincent had prepared a simple breakfast. "Good morning," he said, and she saw that he had already been outside. His hair was damp and he looked tired, as if he had not slept much. "I checked on the horses. They are well rested and ready to travel." "You did not sleep," Magdalena observed. Vincent shrugged. "I am used to little sleep. And I wanted to make sure the storm truly passed before we set out." They ate breakfast together, and Magdalena found herself memorizing details about him. The way his large hands handled the delicate coffee cup with surprising grace. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he almost smiled. The breadth of his shoulders and the strength evident in every movement. All too soon, it was time to go. Magdalena changed back into her own clothes, which had dried overnight by the fire, though they were stiff and uncomfortable. She folded Vincent's clothes carefully and left them on the bed, wishing she had something of her own to leave behind, some token to remember her by. Vincent saddled both horses and helped her mount Daisy, who seemed much recovered after a night's rest in the warm barn. The morning was cool and fresh, the sky a brilliant blue with only a few lingering clouds, and the world seemed full of possibility. They rode together through the morning, and Magdalena was acutely aware that this might be the last time she saw Vincent Vale. He would bring her home and then disappear back into his wilderness, and she would return to her ordinary life. The thought was almost unbearable. "Vincent," she said as they drew closer to her family's homestead, Will I see you again? He looked at her, and his expression was carefully neutral. Would you want to? Yes, Magdalena said without hesitation. Very much yes. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, something that looked like hope struggling with doubt. Magdalena, I am not a man for polite society. I live in the wilderness, I have little money, and I come from nothing. You deserve better than what I could offer. What you could offer, Magdalena repeated. Vincent, you offered me everything that mattered last night. Safety, warmth, kindness, respect. You gave me your horse and walked through the storm. You shared your home and your books and your story. What more could anyone ask for? A future, Vincent said quietly. A proper home, children, respectability. All the things a young woman should want. I want those things, Magdalena admitted, but I want them with the right person. I want them with someone who sees me as an equal, who respects my mind as well as my person. Someone who is strong enough to protect, but gentle enough to care. Someone like you. Vincent brought his horse to a stop, and Magdalena pulled Daisy up beside him. They were on a small rise, and she could see her family's homestead in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney. Magdalena, you barely know me, Vincent said, but his voice was rough with emotion. I know enough, she replied firmly. I know you are a good man. I know you are kind and intelligent and brave. I know that in one night you made me feel more understood and valued than I have felt in 20 years. That is enough for me to want to know more. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand in his. His hand was rough from years of hard work, scarred and calloused, but his touch was infinitely gentle. If I come calling on you, he said slowly, there will be talk. People will judge you for associating with a mountain man. Let them talk, Magdalena said. I have never much cared for gossip. A real smile broke across Vincent's face, transforming his features. You are the bravest woman I have ever met. Then come calling, Magdalena said. Please. Vincent raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her heart flutter. I will come. Tomorrow, if that is not too soon. I will speak to your father and ask his permission to court you properly. He will say yes, Magdalena said confidently. Especially when I tell him how you saved me from the storm. They rode the last mile together in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, full of promise and possibility. When they reached the lane leading to the homestead, Vincent helped Magdalena dismount. I will not come further, he said. This is your time with your family, but tomorrow I will return. I will be waiting, Magdalena promised. She stood and watched as Vincent mounted Thunder and rode away, his broad figure growing smaller in the distance. Only when he had completely disappeared did she turn and walk toward the house, where she could see her mother and father rushing out to meet her. The reunion was emotional and overwhelming. Her mother wept and scolded in equal measure, while her father held her tight and thanked God for her safety. Magdalena told them the whole story, leaving nothing out, and watched her father's expression change from concern to respect as she described Vincent's actions. This mountain man, her father said when she had finished. He treated you honorably. More than honorably, Papa, Magdalena replied. He was a perfect gentleman. He gave me his horse and walked beside me in the rain. He shared his cabin but slept on the floor. He gave me dry clothes and hot food and asked for nothing in return. And he said he will come tomorrow to ask your permission to court me. Her mother gasped, but her father looked thoughtful. And you wish him to court you? I do, Magdalena said firmly. Very much. Her father studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If he presents himself tomorrow, I will hear what he has to say. Any man who would walk through a storm to protect my daughter deserves at least that. Her mother was less convinced. worrying about propriety and what the neighbors would say, but Magdalena stood firm. She had made her choice, and she would not be swayed by fear of gossip or convention. That night, lying in her own bed in her family's homestead, Magdalena could not sleep. She kept thinking about Vincent, wondering if he was in his cabin, perhaps lying awake as well. She thought about his gentle hands and his kind eyes, about the books on his shelves and the pain in his past. She thought about the way he had said her name, with such care and warmth, and the way her heart had responded. She barely knew him, it was true. But sometimes knowing came in moments rather than years. Sometimes you met someone and recognized them, soul calling to soul across whatever distance or circumstances had kept you apart. Magdalena had felt that recognition the moment Vincent smiled at her, and she knew with absolute certainty that he had felt it too. When morning came, Magdalena was awake early, helping her mother with the household chores but constantly watching the road. Her father had gone out to work in the fields, but he had promised to return at midday in case Vincent came. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. Magdalena's younger sister, Margaret, pestered her with questions about the mysterious mountain man, and even her brother, Michael, seemed curious, though he tried to hide it behind masculine indifference. It was just after noon when Magdalena heard the sound of hoofbeats. She rushed to the window and saw Vincent riding toward the homestead on Thunder. He had cleaned up, his hair neatly combed back and his beard trimmed, and he wore what were clearly his best clothes, clean buckskin pants and a shirt that looked new. Magdalena's father emerged from the barn, and Magdalena watched as Vincent dismounted and approached him. Even from a distance, she could see the respectful way Vincent carried himself, the way he extended his hand to her father in greeting. "Mama, I should go out there," Magdalena said urgently. Her mother frowned. "That is not proper. Your father will speak with him first." "Mama, please," Magdalena begged. "This is my future we are discussing. I should be part of the conversation." Her mother looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You have always been strong-willed, Magdalena. Go, but remember your manners." Magdalena did not need to be told twice. She rushed outside, arriving just as Vincent was explaining to her father why he had come. "Mr. Porter," Vincent was saying, his deep voice respectful but firm, "I know I am not the sort of man you might have imagined for your daughter. I live simply, far from town, and I have little to offer in terms of wealth or social standing. But I can promise you this: I will protect her with my life. I will respect her mind and her spirit, and I will work every day to be worthy of her. If you will give me permission to court Magdalena, I will prove myself to be a good and honorable man." Magdalena's father looked Vincent up and down, taking in his size and his weathered appearance. "My daughter tells me you walked through a storm to keep her safe." "Any decent man would have done the same, sir," Vincent replied. "Perhaps," her father said. "But not every man would have given her his horse while he walked. Not every man would have behaved so honorably when alone with a young woman. These things speak to character, Mr. Vale." "Papa," Magdalena said, unable to stay quiet any longer, "Vincent saved my life. But more than that, he sees me as I truly am. He respects my intelligence and my independence. He does not want to change me or confine me. That is more valuable than any amount of wealth or social standing." Her father looked at her, and his expression softened. "You have made up your mind about this man." "I have," Magdalena said, "and I hope you will trust my judgment." "I have always trusted your judgment, daughter," her father replied. "You have a good head on your shoulders." He turned back to Vincent. "You may court my daughter, Mr. Vale. But know this: if you hurt her or betray her trust, you will answer to me." "You have my word, sir," Vincent said seriously. "I would sooner die than hurt Magdalena. The sincerity in his voice made Magdalena's throat tighten with emotion. Vincent looked at her then, and the hope and joy in his eyes made her want to run to him. Propriety be damned. "Would you like to walk with me, Magdalena?" Vincent asked. "With your father's permission, of course." "You may walk together," her father agreed, "but stay within sight of the house." Vincent offered Magdalena his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her fingers. They walked together toward the small creek that ran through the Porter property, far enough from the house to speak privately, but close enough to satisfy propriety. "I was afraid you might have changed your mind," Vincent admitted once they were out of earshot. "That in the light of day, you would realize how foolish it was to encourage a rough mountain man." "I never do foolish things," Magdalena said. "At least, not without good reason." "And this, Vincent, this feels like the best reason in the world." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Magdalena, I meant what I said to your father. I do not have much to offer in terms of worldly goods, but I can offer you a life of honesty and respect. I can offer you my strength and my protection, and I can offer you my heart if you want it." Magdalena felt tears prick her eyes. "I do want it, and I offer you mine in return." Vincent raised one hand to cup her cheek, his touch feather light despite his size. "We will take this slowly. I will court you properly, visit you regularly, give your family time to know me. And if, after all that, you still want me, then I will marry you and spend the rest of my life making you happy." "I already want you," Magdalena whispered. "But I agree, we should do this properly. My parents need to see what I already know, that you are a good man worthy of their trust." Vincent leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and sweet, but it sent warmth flooding through Magdalena's entire body. "I should go," Vincent said reluctantly. "I have already taken up much of your day, and I am sure you need to rest after yesterday's ordeal." "When will you come again?" Magdalena asked. "May I come on Sunday?" Vincent asked. "Perhaps you and your family would permit me to escort you to church services." "Church services?" Magdalena could not hide her surprise. She had not imagined a mountain man would be interested in attending church. Vincent looked slightly embarrassed. "I may live in the wilderness, but I was raised with faith. And if I am to court you properly, I should meet your community and show them I am not the savage they might imagine." "You are the furthest thing from a savage," Magdalena said warmly. "And I would be honored to have you escort me to services." She walked back to the house with him and watched as he mounted Thunder and rode away. Her father joined her on the porch, watching the mountain man disappear down the road. "He seems a good man," her father said quietly. "Rough around the edges, perhaps, but solid. I trust him to treat you well, Magdalena." "He will, Papa," Magdalena assured him. "I know he will." The days until Sunday passed with excruciating slowness. Magdalena helped with the household chores and the fall harvest preparations, but her mind was always on Vincent, wondering what he was doing, hoping he was thinking of her as constantly as she was thinking of him. When Sunday finally arrived, Magdalena dressed in her best Sunday dress, a blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. Her mother helped her arrange her hair, and though neither of them said anything, there was understanding in her mother's eyes. She might have reservations about Vincent Vale, but she could see that her daughter's heart was engaged. Vincent arrived in mid-morning, riding Thunder and leading a smaller mare. "I thought your horse might not be fully recovered from the storm," he explained to Magdalena's father. "I brought one of mine for Magdalena to ride." The thoughtfulness of the gesture was not lost on anyone. Magdalena's father nodded approvingly, and her mother's expression softened slightly. The ride to the church in Nebraska City was pleasant, with Vincent riding protectively close to Magdalena while her family followed behind in their wagon. As they entered town, Magdalena was aware of the stares they attracted. A mountain man was an unusual sight in the civilized confines of the town, and Vincent's size and appearance drew attention. At the church, people whispered and pointed, but Vincent ignored it all, helping Magdalena dismount with careful courtesy and offering his arm as they walked into the building. Magdalena held her head high, proud to be seen with him, and if people wanted to gossip, let them. The service was led by Reverend Matthews, an elderly man who had known Magdalena since childhood. He raised his eyebrows when he saw Vincent but said nothing, proceeding with the service as usual. Vincent stood beside Magdalena, singing the hymns in a surprisingly beautiful baritone, and following along in the prayer book with evident familiarity. After the service, several members of the congregation approached to introduce themselves to Vincent. Most were merely curious, but a few, including Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile, seemed genuinely welcoming. "Mr. Vale," Mrs. Henderson said warmly, "I understand you were the one who helped Magdalena during the storm. That was very gallant of you." "I only did what any decent man would do, madam," Vincent replied, his tone respectful. "Perhaps," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile, "but from what I hear, you went well beyond basic decency. Magdalena is lucky to have such a protector. Not everyone was so kind." A few of the town's more prominent citizens, including the banker Mr. Caldwell and his wife, looked at Vincent with obvious disdain. Magdalena saw them whispering together, their eyes cold and judgmental, and she felt anger rise in her chest. "Ignore them," Vincent murmured as if reading her thoughts. "Their opinions do not matter." "They do matter," Magdalena argued, "because they influence other people, because they make judgments about you without even knowing you." "Then we will prove them wrong," Vincent said simply. "By living well and honestly. That is the only response to prejudice that truly matters." His calm acceptance of the situation humbled Magdalena. She wanted to fight, to defend him against every slight and whisper, but Vincent had lived with judgment for so long that he had learned to rise above it. It was a lesson she needed to learn as well. After church, Vincent was invited to Sunday dinner at the Porter homestead. Magdalena's mother had prepared a feast, and Vincent fit surprisingly well into the family gathering, speaking easily with Magdalena's father about farming and hunting, entertaining her younger siblings with stories of life in the mountains, and complimenting her mother's cooking with genuine appreciation. "You have a beautiful family, Mr. Porter," Vincent said as the meal was winding down, "and a wonderful home. Magdalena is blessed to have been raised with such love and care." "We are blessed to have her," Magdalena's father replied. "She is our eldest and our pride." "I hope you understand what a treasure she is." "I do, sir," Vincent said seriously, "and I will treat her as such." After dinner, Vincent asked permission to walk with Magdalena again, and her father agreed. They walked to the creek, following the same path they had taken before, and this time Vincent took her hand openly, lacing his fingers through hers. "Your family is kind to accept me," Vincent said. "I know it cannot be easy for them, having their daughter courted by someone like me." "You are a good man," Magdalena said firmly. "That is all that should matter." "But it is not all that matters to society," Vincent pointed out. "I have seen the way people look at me in town, some with curiosity, others with fear or disdain. I do not want that to reflect on you, Magdalena." "Then let them see us together and happy," Magdalena said. "Let them see that I choose you freely and gladly. Eventually they will have to accept it." Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her. "You have such faith in people. I lost that faith long ago." "Then let me have enough faith for both of us," Magdalena said, reaching up to touch his bearded cheek. "Let me show you that not everyone is like your father, that love and acceptance are possible." Vincent closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "I do not deserve you." "That is not for you to decide," Magdalena said. "I am choosing you, Vincent, just as you are choosing me. That is all the deserving required." He opened his eyes and looked at her with such intensity that she felt her breath catch. "I am falling in love with you, Magdalena Porter. I know it is too soon to say such things, but it is the truth. I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" Magdalena asked gently. "Because I have never felt this way before," Vincent admitted. "Because I have spent so many years alone, convincing myself that I was better off without connections or feelings. And now you have come into my life like a storm, turning everything upside down, and I do not know how to be anything other than what I am." "You do not need to be anything other than what you are," Magdalena assured him. "I am falling in love with you too, Vincent. With exactly who you are, mountain man and gentleman, strong and gentle, scarred but not broken. I love all of it, all of you." Vincent made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. Magdalena went willingly, wrapping her arms around his broad torso and resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heart beating, strong and steady, and she felt completely safe in his embrace. "We will make this work," she promised. "Whatever obstacles we face, we will overcome them together." "Together," Vincent repeated, as if testing the word. "I have been alone for so long, I had forgotten what together felt like." They stood there by the creek, holding each other as the afternoon sun filtered through the trees, and Magdalena felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be, in the arms of this unlikely man who had walked through a storm to keep her safe. Over the following weeks, Vincent came to visit the Porter homestead regularly. He always brought something with him, game he had hunted or fish he had caught, and he made himself useful around the property, helping with repairs and heavy work. Magdalena's father came to rely on him, and even her mother's reservations began to soften as she saw how respectful and hardworking Vincent was. In town, opinions remained mixed. Some people, like Mrs. Henderson, were openly supportive of the courtship. Others remained skeptical or disapproving, spreading rumors about the wild mountain man who had ensnared the Porter girl. Magdalena heard the whispers but refused to let them affect her. She knew the truth of who Vincent was, and that was all that mattered. Vincent, for his part, handled the attention with remarkable grace. He was always polite and respectful, even to those who treated him with disdain. He attended church services regularly, became known for his fair dealings at the mercantile, and slowly began to build a reputation as a man of integrity. One crisp October afternoon, Vincent arrived at the homestead with a serious expression. Magdalena's father was in town, and her mother was visiting a neighbor, so they had a rare moment of relative privacy on the front porch. "Magdalena," Vincent began, taking her hands in his. "We have been courting for nearly 2 months now. I know that is not a long time by conventional standards, but I am not a conventional man." "No," Magdalena agreed with a smile. "You are not." "I want to marry you," Vincent said bluntly. "I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. But I need you to understand what that life would be like." "Tell me," Magdalena urged. Vincent took a deep breath. "I have been thinking about the future, about what I could offer you. My cabin is comfortable but small. It is isolated, far from town and your family. If you married me, you would be taking on a hard life, Magdalena. There would be long winters with only each other for company, difficult conditions, real danger at times from weather or wild animals. I could not give you the comfortable life you might have with a farmer or a shopkeeper." "Do you think I want comfortable?" Magdalena asked. "Vincent, I have lived on a homestead my entire life. I know about hard work and harsh conditions. Those things do not frighten me." "But you would be giving up so much," Vincent protested. "Your family, your friends, the possibility of teaching at the school." "I would not be giving up my family," Magdalena corrected. "I would still visit them regularly, and as for teaching, I could teach our children. That would be just as fulfilling as teaching at a school, perhaps more so because they would be ours." Vincent's expression softened at the mention of children. "You want children with me?" "Of course I do," Magdalena said. "I want a life with you, Vincent. All of it, the hard parts and the beautiful parts. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to build a home with you, wherever that home might be." "Even if it means being isolated from society?" Vincent asked. "I have never fit well into society," Magdalena admitted. "I have always been too outspoken, too independent, but with you I do not feel like I need to change or hide parts of myself. With you I can just be." Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "I will spend every day trying to make you happy," he promised. "I will build us a better house if you wish, or we can stay in the cabin. Whatever you want, I will work to provide." "The cabin is perfect," Magdalena assured him. "I loved it from the moment I saw it. It felt like home." "Then say you will marry me," Vincent urged. "Say you will be my wife and let me be your husband. Say yes, Magdalena, and make me the happiest man alive." "Yes," Magdalena said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Vale. I will be your wife and you will be my husband, and we will build a beautiful life together." Vincent kissed her then, a real kiss, deep and passionate and full of promise. Magdalena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with all the love and longing she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I would have this," he whispered. "A woman to love, a future to look forward to. You have given me hope, Magdalena. You have given me everything." "You have given me everything too," Magdalena replied. "You walked through a storm for me, Vincent. That is when I knew. That is when I understood that you were the man I had been waiting for." They sat together on the porch steps, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun set over the Nebraska plains and planning their future. They would marry in December, Vincent decided, after the harvest was fully in and before the worst of winter set in. It would give them time to prepare, to make sure Magdalena's family was comfortable with the arrangement, and to build a proper addition to the cabin if Magdalena wished. When Magdalena's parents returned and heard the news, reactions were mixed. Her father was supportive, having come to respect Vincent over the weeks of courtship. Her mother was more hesitant, worried about her daughter living so far from family in such rustic conditions. But when she saw the happiness in Magdalena's eyes and the devotion in Vincent's expression, even she had to admit that this was a love match in the truest sense. The months leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. Magdalena sewed a wedding dress with her mother and younger sister, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk. Vincent worked on expanding his cabin, adding a proper sitting room and a larger bedroom, determined to make it as comfortable as possible for his bride. The wedding was held on a cold December day at the church in Nebraska City. Despite the weather, many people attended, curious to see the mountain man marry the Porter girl. Vincent looked magnificent in new clothes, his hair and beard neatly trimmed, his powerful frame barely contained by the confines of civilized attire. Magdalena walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes locked on Vincent's face. She saw the love and wonder there, the slight sheen of tears in his dark eyes, and her heart swelled with emotion. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with solemn dignity. When the time came for vows, Vincent's voice was strong and clear as he promised to love and cherish Magdalena for all their days. Magdalena's voice shook slightly with emotion as she made the same promises, but her conviction was absolute. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews declared. "You may kiss your bride." Vincent cupped Magdalena's face in his large hands with infinite gentleness and kissed her softly, reverently, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The congregation applauded, and when Vincent and Magdalena turned to face them as husband and wife, even the skeptics had to admit they made a striking couple. The reception was held at the Porter homestead, with food and music and dancing. Vincent was clearly uncomfortable with so much attention, but he relaxed when Magdalena took his hand and led him through a simple waltz. He was surprisingly graceful for such a large man, moving with the same controlled power that characterized everything he did. "Are you happy, husband?" Magdalena asked as they danced. "Happier than I ever imagined possible, wife," Vincent replied, and the joy in his voice made her want to weep. As evening fell, Vincent and Magdalena left the celebration, riding together toward their new home. Vincent had insisted on bringing Thunder and the smaller mare, and Magdalena rode beside her husband through the winter twilight, her heart full to bursting. The cabin was warm and welcoming when they arrived, with a fire already burning in the stove and lanterns casting a soft glow. Vincent had decorated it with pine boughs and wildflowers he had somehow found despite the season, and Magdalena felt tears prick her eyes at his thoughtfulness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vale," Vincent said, lifting her down from her horse. "Mrs. Vale," Magdalena repeated, savoring the words. "I like the sound of that." Vincent carried her over the threshold, a tradition he had clearly learned somewhere in his past. Once inside, he set her down gently and just looked at her, as if he still could not quite believe she was real. "I am afraid," he admitted quietly. "Afraid that I will wake up and this will all have been a dream." "It is not a dream," Magdalena assured him. She took his hand and placed it over her heart so he could feel it beating. "I am real and I am here and I am yours. Forever, Vincent. I am yours forever." The tenderness in his expression transformed into something deeper, more primal. Vincent kissed her again, and this time there was nothing hesitant about it. He kissed her with passion and possession, with love and need, and Magdalena responded with equal fervor. They came together as husband and wife that night, and it was everything Magdalena had dreamed it would be. Vincent was gentle despite his strength, patient and attentive, making sure her pleasure matched his own. Afterward they lay tangled together in the bed, skin to skin, hearts beating in synchrony. "I love you," Vincent whispered into the darkness. "I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." "Do not be frightened," Magdalena replied, tracing patterns on his broad chest. "Love is not something to fear, it is something to celebrate." "I have spent so long being afraid," Vincent admitted. "Afraid of turning into my father, afraid of hurting someone, afraid of being hurt. But with you, those fears seem smaller somehow." "Because love is stronger than fear," Magdalena said. "Love is what saved you, Vincent. Your mother's love kept you human during your childhood, and your love for yourself, for life, kept you going in the mountains. And now our love for each other will carry us through whatever comes." Vincent pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms. "How did you become so wise?" "I am not wise," Magdalena laughed. "I am just a farmer's daughter who fell in love with a mountain man." "The best thing I ever did," Vincent said seriously, "was walk through that storm beside you. If I had not, I would have missed this, missed you, missed having a reason to come in from the wilderness." "Then I am grateful for that storm," Magdalena said. Even though I was terrified and freezing and certain I would die, I am grateful because it brought me to you." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and when morning came, Magdalena woke to find Vincent watching her with an expression of such love and contentment that it took her breath away. "Good morning, wife," he said softly. "Good morning, husband," she replied, stretching luxuriously. "What shall we do on our first day as a married couple?" "I thought I might teach you to shoot," Vincent said. "If you are going to live out here, you should know how to protect yourself when I am away hunting or trapping." Magdalena appreciated the practicality of the suggestion. "That sounds perfect. And perhaps you could show me more of the land around the cabin. I want to know every inch of our property." "Our property," Vincent repeated, as if testing how the words felt. "I like that. I have always thought of it as mine alone, but now it is ours." They spent the day together, and Vincent proved to be a patient teacher. He showed Magdalena how to load and fire his rifle, how to track animals through the forest, how to read the weather by observing the sky and the behavior of wildlife. In turn, Magdalena shared her own knowledge, teaching him some of the more refined cooking techniques her mother had taught her and suggesting ways to organize the cabin more efficiently. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Winter settled over Nebraska in earnest, bringing deep snows and bitter cold, but the cabin remained warm and cozy. Vincent had laid in ample supplies for the season, and Magdalena discovered she loved the enforced closeness of winter, the long evenings spent reading together by firelight or talking about their hopes and dreams. In the spring, Magdalena discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent one morning as they sat together watching the sunrise, and he reacted with a mixture of joy and terror that made her laugh. "I will be a father," he said wonderingly. "Magdalena, what if I am like my own father? What if I hurt our child?" "You will not," Magdalena said firmly. "Vincent, you are the gentlest man I know. You would never hurt a child." "But what if the anger is in my blood?" Vincent insisted. "What if it comes out when I am under stress?" Magdalena took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. You are not your father. You have spent your entire adult life proving that. You have built a good life here. You have treated me with nothing but kindness and respect, and you will be a wonderful father. I know this with absolute certainty." Tears spilled down Vincent's cheeks, the first time Magdalena had seen him cry. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it," Magdalena urged. "Believe in yourself the way I believe in you." Vincent pulled her close, holding her and their unborn child with infinite care. "I will try. For you and for our baby, I will try." As Magdalena's pregnancy progressed, Vincent became even more protective and attentive. He insisted she rest more, do less heavy work, eat the best portions of every meal. It would have been suffocating if it had not been so clearly motivated by love and concern. In early autumn, when the trees were turning gold and red and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter to come, Magdalena went into labor. Vincent rode at breakneck speed to fetch the midwife from the nearest homestead, a sturdy woman named Mrs. Kovacs, who had delivered half the babies in the county. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent paced outside like a caged animal, nearly wearing a groove in the porch with his restless movement. When he finally heard the cry of a newborn baby, he burst through the door with such force that Mrs. Kovacs jumped. "You have a son," the midwife announced with a smile. "A big, healthy boy." Vincent approached the bed where Magdalena lay exhausted but radiant, holding a swaddled bundle. His son. He had a son. "You want to hold him?" Magdalena asked. Vincent's hands shook as he reached for the baby, but once the small, warm weight was settled in his arms, something fundamental shifted inside him. He looked down at his son's tiny face, at the perfect little fingers curling against the blanket, and felt love so overwhelming it threatened to bring him to his knees. "He is beautiful," Vincent whispered. "Magdalena, he is so beautiful." "What should we name him?" Magdalena asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had not decided on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Vincent knew exactly what the child should be called. "Thomas," he said. "After my mother's father, he was the only person who showed me kindness when I was a boy." "Thomas Vale," Magdalena tested the name. "I love it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one." In the weeks that followed, Vincent proved himself to be a devoted father. He was gentle and patient with the baby, getting up for nighttime feedings and changings without complaint. He fashioned a beautiful cradle from wood he had carefully selected and dried, carving animals and trees into the sides with surprising artistry. Watching him with their son, Magdalena's heart swelled with love and pride. The man who had been afraid of his own capacity for violence was the gentlest, most caring father she could have imagined. They settled into a rhythm as a family. Vincent continued his hunting and trapping, but he never stayed away for more than a day or two, unwilling to leave Magdalena and Thomas alone for longer. Magdalena managed the household and cared for their son, and in the evenings they would sit together as a family, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's company. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Magdalena gave birth to a daughter they named Victoria, a tiny, fierce thing who had Vincent wrapped around her little finger from the moment she drew breath. The cabin had been expanded twice by then, with proper separate bedrooms for the children and a larger common area where the family could gather. Vincent had become more accepted in Nebraska City over the years, his reputation for honesty and hard work overcoming most people's initial prejudices. Magdalena had started teaching at the local school part-time, bringing Thomas and Victoria with her and loving the work she had always dreamed of doing. One evening, when Thomas was 8 and Victoria was 5, the family sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas was reading a book, his young brow furrowed in concentration, while Victoria chattered about the flowers she had found in the meadow. Vincent had his arm around Magdalena, and she leaned against his solid warmth with perfect contentment. "You remember the storm?" Vincent asked quietly, his voice just for her. "Every detail," Magdalena replied. "I remember how frightened I was, how cold, and then I saw you emerging from the rain like some kind of wild guardian angel." Vincent chuckled. "Guardian angel is not a description most people would apply to me." "Then most people do not know you the way I do," Magdalena said. She turned to look at him, studying the face she knew as well as her own. There were lines there now that had not been there the night they met, smile lines and worry lines, the marks of a life fully lived. His hair was still long, though shot through with silver now, and his beard was more gray than dark. But his eyes were the same, warm and full of love when they looked at her. "I would do it again," Vincent said. "Walk through 1,000 storms if it meant finding you at the end." "And I would ride beside you," Magdalena replied. "Though preferably on your horse, because I do not think my poor Daisy could have managed many more storms." They laughed together, and their children looked up, smiling at their parents' happiness even though they did not understand the joke. This was their normal, this love and laughter and security. And Magdalena was fiercely glad that they would grow up never knowing the fear and loneliness that had marked both their parents' early lives. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge, Vincent carried a sleepy Victoria inside while Thomas followed, still clutching his book. Magdalena remained on the porch for a moment longer, looking out at the land she had come to love, the wilderness that was now her home. She thought about that young woman who had been caught in a storm 9 years ago, terrified and certain she was going to die. If someone had told that woman that the mountain man who rescued her would become her whole world, the father of her children, the love of her life, she would not have believed it. But life had a way of surprising you, of bringing you exactly what you needed when you least expected it. Vincent appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. "Are you coming, love?" "Yes," Magdalena said, rising and going to him. "I am coming home." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close, kissing the top of her head as they walked inside together. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night and holding in the warmth, the laughter, the love that filled every corner of their home. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father, showing an aptitude for tracking and hunting that made Vincent proud. Victoria developed her mother's sharp intelligence and love of learning, and by the time she was 7, she was already helping Magdalena teach the younger students at the school. When Thomas was 12 and Victoria was 9, Magdalena gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Marcus and Vera. Vincent, now in his 40s but still powerful and vital, approached fatherhood for the 3rd and 4th times with more confidence and joy than he had thought possible. 4 children, he marveled one night as he and Magdalena watched the twins sleeping in their shared cradle. 15 years ago I was alone in these mountains, convinced I would die alone. Now look at us. We have been blessed, Magdalena agreed. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to wake up beside you every day, that we created this beautiful family together. Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her close. They fit together perfectly after so many years, their bodies knowing each other with intimate familiarity. "You saved me," Vincent said quietly. "That night in the storm, you saved me from a life of loneliness and isolation. You gave me a reason to come back to civilization, to be part of the world again." "And you saved me," Magdalena replied, "from a life of settling for less than I deserved. You showed me what real love looks like, what it means to be truly seen and valued by another person." They stood together in the quiet cabin, their children sleeping around them, and felt the deep contentment that comes from a life well lived and love well tended. As the children grew, the cabin grew with them. Vincent had become an accomplished carpenter over the years, and he built additions with care and skill, making sure his family always had enough space. The property around the cabin was developed too, with a proper barn for their growing number of horses, a chicken coop, and a large garden that Magdalena tended with help from the children. Thomas, at 16, had grown into a fine young man, nearly as tall as his father and already showing signs of developing the same powerful build. He had inherited Vincent's protective instincts and Magdalena's compassionate heart, and he was respected by everyone who knew him. Victoria, at 13, was a force of nature. She had her father's determination and her mother's intelligence, and she had announced her intention to become a teacher like Magdalena. She was already helping to run the school in Nebraska City, several days a week, showing a natural gift for explaining complex ideas in ways that children could understand. The twins, Marcus and Vera, were 5 years old and full of mischief. They had an uncanny ability to get into trouble together, but were so charming that it was hard to stay angry with them for long. One day in late spring, the entire family made the journey into Nebraska City for a town festival. It was the first time in years that they had all gone together, and Magdalena was struck by how much things had changed since she had first met Vincent. He was no longer the mysterious, slightly frightening mountain man who had walked through a storm beside her. Now he was simply Vincent Vale, respected member of the community, devoted husband and father, friend to many. People greeted him warmly as the family made their way through the festival, and children ran up to show Thomas and Victoria their various games and contests. Mrs. Henderson, now elderly but still sharp as ever, pulled Magdalena aside with a knowing smile. "I told you he was a good one," she said. "That day after the storm, when you first brought him to church, I knew. A man who gives up his horse and walks in the rain for a woman he barely knows, that is a man worth keeping." "You were right," Magdalena agreed, watching Vincent lift Marcus onto his shoulders so the boy could see better. "He is the best man I have ever known. You were good for him too, Mrs. Henderson continued. "He was half wild when he first came around, more comfortable with animals than people. But you civilized him without taming him, if that makes sense. He is still strong and independent, but he has learned to be part of a community, part of a family." Magdalena had never thought of it quite that way before, but Mrs. Henderson was right. Vincent had changed over the years, becoming more open and connected while still maintaining the core of strength and independence that had first drawn Magdalena to him. That night, after the festival, the family returned to their cabin tired but happy. The children were asleep almost before they hit their beds, worn out from a day of games and treats. Vincent and Magdalena sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "This was a good day," Vincent said contentedly. "It was," Magdalena agreed. "I love our life, Vincent. I love what we have built together." "So do I," Vincent replied. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Sometimes I still dream about that night. The storm, finding you on the road, the fear in your eyes. In my dreams I keep walking, I pass you by, and I wake up in a cold sweat realizing what I almost missed." Magdalena reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "But you did not pass by. You stopped, you helped, you gave me your horse and walked beside me through the rain. That is who you are, Vincent. That is who you have always been." "I was afraid that night too," Vincent admitted. "Afraid that if I took you back to my cabin, you would see how alone I was, how empty my life had become. But you did not judge me. You saw past the rough exterior to the person underneath. Because you let me see," Magdalena said. "You trusted me enough to show me your books, to tell me about your past, to be vulnerable. That was brave, Vincent, braver than walking through any storm." They sat in companionable silence, hands clasped, hearts aligned, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The years continued their steady march. Thomas fell in love with a young woman from a neighboring homestead and married at 20. Victoria, true to her word, became a teacher and eventually opened her own school in a settlement west of Nebraska City. The twins grew into teenagers, Marcus showing an interest in horses and ranching while Vera developed a talent for drawing and painting. Vincent and Magdalena, now in their 50s, watched their children build their own lives with pride and a touch of melancholy. The cabin that had once been full to bursting with children and noise grew quieter as the children left to start their own families. But they were never lonely. Thomas and his wife lived close enough to visit regularly, and they blessed Vincent and Magdalena with grandchildren, two boys who looked remarkably like Vincent had at that age. Victoria visited when she could, always full of stories about her students. The twins, still living at home while they figured out their paths in life, kept things lively. One autumn evening, nearly 30 years after the night they met, Vincent and Magdalena sat together on the porch watching yet another storm roll across the plains. It was not as severe as the storm that had brought them together, but the rain was steady and the wind was strong. "Do you remember?" Vincent asked, as he always did when it rained. "I remember," Magdalena replied, as she always did. "I remember thinking I was going to die on that road. I remember seeing you emerge from the rain like something out of a dream. I remember the feeling of safety when you lifted me onto Thunder's back. I remember thinking you were the bravest, most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Vincent added. "Even soaked through and shivering, there was something about you that called to me. We were meant to find each other that night," Magdalena said with certainty. "All the choices we made, all the paths we took, they were leading us to that moment on that road in that storm." Vincent pulled her close, and she settled against his side, fitting perfectly as she always had. His body was not as powerful as it had been in his youth. His hair was fully gray now, and there were deep lines etched into his face by time and weather. But to Magdalena, he was as handsome as he had been the night they met, perhaps more so because now she knew every facet of his character, every strength and vulnerability that made him who he was. "I would do it all again," Vincent said quietly. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy. I would walk through that storm 1,000 times to end up here with you, with our family, with this life we built together." "As would I," Magdalena agreed. "You are my heart, Vincent Vale. You have been since that night, and you will be until my last breath." They sat together as the storm raged around them, safe and warm and surrounded by love, and they knew that whatever storms life might bring in the years ahead, they would face them as they had always faced everything, together. The storm eventually passed, as storms always do, leaving behind a world washed clean and renewed. And in the cabin on the edge of the wilderness, a mountain man and the woman he had rescued from a storm 30 years ago held each other close and gave thanks for the beautiful, unexpected life they had been blessed to share. Years later, when they were both in their 70s, Vincent and Magdalena would sit on that same porch and tell their grandchildren and great-grandchildren the story of how they met. The children would listen with wide eyes as their grandfather described walking through the rain, as their grandmother talked about being lifted onto a great horse by a gentle giant of a man. "But why did you give her your horse, Grandpa?" one of the great-grandchildren would invariably ask. "Why did you walk?" And Vincent would smile and pull Magdalena close and say, "Because when you love someone, truly love them, their comfort and safety matter more than your own. I walked so she could ride. It was the easiest decision I ever made." The children would nod sagely, not fully understanding yet, but sensing the deep truth in their grandfather's words. And Magdalena would look at her husband with all the love of a lifetime in her eyes, and know that she was the luckiest woman alive. Their story became a legend in the family, passed down through generations. The tale of the mountain man who gave up his horse and walked through a storm beside the woman who would become his wife. The woman who saw past his rough exterior to the good man beneath, and the life they built together through love and determination, and an unshakable commitment to each other. When Vincent passed away at the age of 78, he died as he had lived, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that he had been loved and had loved well. Magdalena held his hand as he took his last breath, and through her tears she whispered, "Thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for walking beside me through the storm." Magdalena lived another 5 years, cared for lovingly by her children and grandchildren. She spent her final years in the cabin Vincent had built for them, surrounded by books and memories and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. When she passed, peacefully in her sleep, her family buried her beside Vincent on a hill overlooking the cabin, and on their shared headstone they carved the words, "Together through every storm." And so ends the story of Vincent Vale and Magdalena Porter, the mountain man and the woman he rescued, who found in each other the love and companionship that made their lives complete. Their legacy lived on in their children, their grandchildren, and all the generations that followed, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and love that transcends all obstacles. It was a love story that began with a simple act of selflessness, a man walking through the rain so a woman could ride, and it blossomed into something beautiful and lasting that touched countless lives.